Hey everyone, Fagros here, and today I want to talk about why Brittle is insanely overpowered. So for the past couple of months on stream, I've been telling people that Brittle counts as total crit rather than base crit. POB counts it as base crit, however, I was pretty sure based on a test I'd done in the past that it was total crit, and on top of that, it made no sense for it to be base crit. Today, however, I realized that, thinking back, the test that I was previously running was actually flawed. I was doing the test in red maps, and I had swapped out my gear to tanky gear, and thus wasn't accuracy capped, which meant that I wasn't able to accurately test my crit chance. So I decided to redo the test today, and I was actually shocked. So to do this test, we are using a test character, and we're using an Act 7 boss. Now, the way this is going to work is that we have a character that has 56% crit. If you add 6% worth of Brittle to that, hypothetically, if it was total crit, this should only add up to 62% crit, and that means that we should be critting about 6 out of every 10 attacks. The way we're going to test whether we're critting or not is by using a cast on crit setup with our Ice Crash in conjunction with Ball Lightning, and Ball Lightning has greater volley and greater multiple projectiles, so that it's shooting out 9 projectiles at a time, so that you can clearly tell whether it's procced or not. Now, the reason why we're using 6% Brittle is because if you add 6% worth of Brittle effect in PvP, it shows it as 100% crit chance. Okay, so basically, if Brittle does work as base crit, hypothetically, once we've stacked up our Brittle, every attack should crit. If Brittle doesn't work as base crit and it instead works as total crit, we should instead be getting crits every 6 attacks out of 10. Okay, so here we go. Every attack, as you can see, is shooting out ball lightning projectiles. And the boss, as you can also see, is at about 6% Brittle. We have not yet attacked and not crit. Every single attack so far has been a crit. And this to me confirms that Brittle is indeed base crit rather than total crit, as I have been falsely telling people. So why exactly is Brittle overpowered? Well, I thought I would use some existing sources of base crit as a comparison to sort of put it into perspective, right? And we'll just go through it in order. 1% from level 20 Nightblade support, you get 1.52% from Frost Shield at 4 stages, 1.7% from 2020 Divergent Assassin's Mark, 1.8% from a well-rolled Hatred Watcher's Eye, you get 2% from Elevated Hunter or Elder Body Armor mods, 2% from level 20 Critical Strike Chance support, 2% from pre-nerf Bottled Faith. You get 8% from having a 400 energy shield with Seething Fury, the jewel. Now, this is considered by a lot of people very overpowered. It only works with Spectral Shield Throw, Shield Crush, and Shield Charge. So only 3 skills in the game get to benefit from this, and it requires a 400 energy shield to get this high, so typically with the kind of shields people are playing at, they're typically using things that are closer to 6.2, 6.4% crit. Brittle is 15% base crit. An easier way to explain this is that if you have a 5% crit weapon and 400% increased critical strike chance from all your gear and your tree, this gives you 25% critical strike chance, which is kind of a modest amount, and it's what a lot of low investment melee crit builds end up with in the end. Then you add capped Brittle, and you now have 100% critical strike chance. Every single attack is critting, which is a crazy amount of free damage with very little investment. All you have to do is do a few big hits with cold damage, and you're at the crit cap. Now, if you remember in the demonstration I just showed you, my character was using a Act 1 weapon that was white, it had no stats on it, and I had taken a lot of the added damage from my gear out of the build. I took a lot of my damage increases out of the build. I was doing very small hits against the boss, right? The boss was taking hardly any damage, and yet that was still 6% crit. Now, you may be wondering, is it feasible to reach 15% Brittle? And in a lot of cases, it may not be. So I have a Elemental Rage Vortex Berserker that was in fact the character I used to demonstrate. Rage Vortex hits very fast rather than very hard, and that character can still reach around 7 to 8% Brittle against Cirrus. The thing is, however, that for most builds, given the typical amount of crit investment that you grab, having 7 to 8% base crit added to your build pretty much makes it a guarantee that you're able to reach the crit cap well before you reach 15% Brittle. So in a lot of cases, regardless of the skill you're playing, Brittle basically just means your character can easily crit on every single attack without having to invest very hard into crit. I hope this video has been as eye-opening for you guys as it was for me. I'm really glad I tested this because I completely misunderstood the way Brittle was working, and I was pretty certain that it was total crit. Turns out it was base crit. That means Brittle is now probably the best tool for scaling damage in the entire game, with zero exceptions. It opens up a lot of new possibilities in terms of how to build characters, and I'm really excited now going forward to play around with it. Although I am pretty sure, given the stuff I've played around with internally on PoB at the moment, Brittle is almost certainly getting nerfed. I think it managed to fly under the radar for so long because we couldn't check how much Brittle it was stacking up on enemies, and I think a lot of people assumed that if it was going to be adding base crit, that it was simply going to add a very, very tiny amount of base crit given how powerful base crit is, but it turns out it's just completely broken. It's, you know, the equivalent of something like 8 maxed out Hatred Watcher's Eyes. It's just crazy. And something like that just has no place in the game whatsoever. You know, nothing comes close to adding as much damage to your build as getting Brittle into it, so I can't see it lasting very long. If you like this video, give me a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.